Today, I'm going to share something with you that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. This is the story of how a single phone call, 3 months after my divorce, ripped open wounds I thought had finally started to heal, and forced me to face demons I'd been running from for years. If my story touches your heart, I need you to do something for me. Show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me, which city are you from? I want to see how far a woman's voice can truly reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories to light. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when everything changed. I remember I was sitting in my small balcony garden, the one I'd carefully cultivated in my new apartment, sipping chamomile tea and finally feeling like I could breathe again. The past 6 years had nearly destroyed me, but these last 3 months since the divorce, they'd been mine. Truly mine. The peace I felt was so profound, so unfamiliar, that sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for it to shatter. And then my phone rang. The number wasn't saved, but something about it felt familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. I should have ignored it. Every instinct told me to let it ring, but curiosity, or maybe some sick need for closure, made me answer. Hello? Isabella, thank God. The voice hit me like a punch to the gut. It was sharp, frantic, laced with that particular brand of entitlement I'd hoped never to hear again. You need to get to Riverside Memorial Hospital right now. It's Christopher. There's been an accident, a terrible accident. The doctors say he needs emergency surgery, but they're demanding $40,000 as a deposit. You need to bring the money immediately and save your husband. I sat perfectly still, my teacup frozen halfway to my lips. That voice. That horrible, imperious voice that had haunted my nightmares for years. It was Margot Sterling, my former mother-in-law, the woman who'd made my life a living hell for 6 years. The woman who, along with her precious son, had thrown me out of their house in the middle of a thunderstorm without a second thought. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I think you have the wrong number." "What? Isabella, stop playing games. Christopher is dying. He's your husband and you need to save him. $40,000. Get it and get here now." I set my teacup down carefully on the little wrought iron table. The clink of porcelain seemed impossibly loud. "Sterling," I said, deliberately using her formal name instead of the title she'd once demanded I use. "Perhaps your memory is failing you. Let me refresh it. 3 months ago, a judge signed papers that ended any connection between your son and me. Christopher Sterling is not my husband. He hasn't been for 3 months. So whatever trouble he's in, whatever money he needs, it has absolutely nothing to do with me." The silence on the other end was delicious. I could practically hear her brain struggling to process the fact that her former doormat of a daughter-in-law had just spoken to her like an equal. "How dare you?" she finally screeched. "After everything, after 6 years together, you're just going to let him die? What kind of heartless woman are you? Where is your compassion? Where is your humanity?" I laughed. I actually laughed, and it felt incredible. "That's rich coming from you, Mrs. Sterling. Tell me, where was your compassion that night in the rain, when you threw my belongings into the mud and locked the door in my face? Where was your humanity when your son came home smelling like another woman's perfume, and you told me to stop being so suspicious? Where was your compassion when I handed over my entire salary to you every month, and you gave me $20 a day for groceries for 3 people? That's different. We were family. Were, I emphasized, past tense, and even when we were supposedly family, you both treated me like hired help. So no, Mrs. Sterling, I won't be bringing you any money. But I am curious about something. What happened to that beautiful, sophisticated Vanessa you were so excited to welcome as your daughter-in-law? Why isn't she rushing to the hospital with her apparently unlimited resources?" Another pause. This one longer. I'd clearly hit a nerve. That woman, Margot's voice cracked, losing all its earlier force. She disappeared. Took everything. The money, the jewelry, everything we'd given her. "Please, Isabella, I'm begging you, just this once, save Christopher. I know we treated you badly, but please?" "No." The word came out firm, final, carrying 6 years of suppressed rage. "I'm not a charity, Mrs. Sterling, and I'm certainly not your family's personal ATM." That $40,000? I'm saving it for my daughter's future. You remember her, don't you? Your granddaughter, the one you called worthless because she wasn't a boy? Isabella, please. My finger jabbed the red button with more force than necessary, and suddenly I was shaking. Not with fear or sadness, but with pure undiluted rage that I'd kept bottled up for so long it had fermented into something toxic. I sat there in my little garden, surrounded by the flowers I'd planted with my own hands, in the apartment I'd rented with my own money, and I remembered. God, how I remembered everything. 6 years ago, I was 27 years old, fresh-faced and stupidly optimistic. I'd just landed a dream job as a senior marketing coordinator at a major firm in Seattle, pulling in $6,500 a month. I had a degree from a good university, a bright future ahead of me, and I'd just married Christopher Sterling, who seemed like everything I'd ever wanted. He was handsome in that clean-cut, preppy way, tall, well-dressed, articulate. He worked as a financial analyst and made around $3,000 a month. His mother, Margot, was a widow who owned a beautiful Victorian house in one of Seattle's nicer neighborhoods. On paper, everything looked perfect. Reality, as it always does, told a very different story. The first red flag should have been the wedding night. We hadn't even finished greeting the last of our guests when Margot called me into the study. She was sitting in this massive leather chair, looking like some kind of judge about to pass sentence, and she handed me a typed list of rules. "Isabella," she said, not even looking at me, "now that you're a Sterling, there are certain expectations you need to meet. I've raised Christopher alone since his father passed, and I won't stand by and watch some outsider ruin what I've built." I scanned the list, my stomach dropping with each line. Wake up at 5:30 every morning to prepare breakfast. Deep clean the entire house every Saturday. All grocery shopping must be approved by Margot. No visiting friends without permission. No spending money without permission. This is a joke, right? I laughed nervously, looking to Christopher for support. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom knows best, Isabella. Just do what she says. It'll make everything easier." That should have been my exit cue. I should have walked out right then. But I was young and foolish, and I'd been raised to believe that marriage meant compromise. That family meant sacrifice. So I stayed. The next 6 years were a masterclass in psychological torture. Every morning, I woke up before dawn to clean a house that Margot would inspect with white gloves, literally. She'd run her finger along baseboards and picture frames, and if she found even a speck of dust, I'd hear about it for hours. Is this how they taught you to clean where you come from? I should have known better than to expect standards from someone of your background. My background. That was her favorite weapon. I came from a small town called Brookfield, about 2 hours from Seattle. My parents were school teachers, good people who'd worked hard to give me every opportunity, but to Margot, that made me inferior. Someone who should be grateful that the Sterling family had deigned to let me marry in. After cleaning, I'd rush to the market. Margot would give me exactly $20 for dinner groceries. $20 to feed 3 adults in Seattle. Do you know what that means? It means choosing between vegetables and protein. It means buying the cheapest, lowest quality ingredients and somehow making them palatable. It means skipping lunch yourself so you can afford an extra chicken thigh for your husband. And then I'd work a full day at my demanding job where I was respected, valued, and treated like a professional. The contrast was jarring. At the office, I was Isabella Chen, the marketing coordinator who'd landed 3 major accounts in her first year. At home, I was just Christopher's wife, the woman who couldn't even clean a house properly. The part that still makes my blood boil, Margot controlled all our money. Every month, my salary went straight into her account. Christopher's too. She claimed it was for our own good, that she was saving it for our future, that young people were too irresponsible to manage their own finances. I believed her. God help me, I actually believed her. Out of my $6,500 monthly salary, she gave me $20 a day. Some days when she was feeling particularly generous or I'd been especially obedient, she'd give me $25. That was supposed to cover my lunch, my transportation, and dinner groceries. Do the math. That's $600 a month out of the $6,500 I earned. Where did the rest go? I didn't know. I didn't dare ask. The one time I suggested that maybe I should have access to my own bank account, Margot looked at me like I'd committed treason. "Are you accusing me of stealing? After everything I've done for you, I've given you a home, a family, respectability, And this is how you repay me? With suspicion and ingratitude? Christopher, of course, took his mother's side. He always took his mother's side. The isolation was calculated and complete. I couldn't see my parents without permission, which was rarely granted. They lived so far away, and we have responsibilities here, Margot would say. My friends from college slowly drifted away after I canceled plans one too many times. How could I explain that my mother-in-law wouldn't let me go out? That I had to account for every minute of my day? They would have thought I was crazy. Maybe I was crazy. Crazy for staying. Crazy for hoping things would get better. Crazy for believing that love and patience would eventually win out. I did love Christopher, in the beginning, or maybe I loved the idea of him, the potential of what we could have been. But day by day, year by year, that love withered under the weight of his indifference and his mother's cruelty. When his mother berated me for burning the rice or folding his shirts wrong or spending an extra $1 on vegetables, he'd just sit there, scrolling through his phone or watching TV, acting like he couldn't hear her. At night, when I tried to talk to him about it, he'd sigh like I was the most exhausting person on earth. Why do you always have to make problems? Mom is just trying to help. She's old-fashioned, yes, but she means well. Can't you just try a little harder to get along with her? Try harder. As if I wasn't waking up at 5:30 every morning. As if I wasn't working a full-time job and then coming home to clean and cook for hours. As if I wasn't living on scraps while my own salary was being hoarded by his mother. But I tried. God, how I tried. Because 2 years into our marriage, I got pregnant, and foolishly, naively, I thought a baby would change everything. I thought Margot would soften, that Christopher would mature, that we'd finally become a real family. Our daughter, Lily, was born on a cold November morning. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair, and lungs that could wake the dead. I loved her instantly, completely, with a fierceness that scared me. Margot came to the hospital once. She looked at Lily for all of 30 seconds, sniffed and said, "Well, it's a girl. That's disappointing. I suppose we'll have to try again for a boy." That should have been my breaking point. What kind of grandmother looks at a newborn baby and expresses disappointment? What kind of person values a child based solely on their gender? But I was tired, so tired. And I told myself it was just her generation, her old-fashioned thinking, her disappointment speaking. I told myself she'd come around once she got to know Lily. She never did. For 4 years, Margot barely acknowledged her own granddaughter. She wouldn't buy her toys or clothes. She wouldn't babysit, even for an hour. On Lily's birthdays, she wouldn't even get her a card. But she'd complain constantly about the noise, the mess, the expense of having a child in the house. "Children are such a burden," she'd sigh dramatically. "Especially girls. Boys at least carry on the family name." Christopher was no better. He loved Lily in a distant, absent-minded way. Like she was a pet he'd agreed to keep, but didn't really want to interact with. He never changed a diaper, never woke up for nighttime feedings, never took her to the park or read her a bedtime story. So I did it all. Worked full-time, ran the household, raised our daughter, all while living on $20 a day and enduring constant criticism. I was stretched so thin I was barely a person anymore, just a collection of roles and responsibilities, with nothing left for myself. And then 4 years into my daughter's life, 6 years into my marriage, everything changed, but not in the way I'd hoped. It started with small things. Christopher began staying late at work. He started paying attention to his appearance in a way he never had before. New cologne, nicer clothes, more time spent on his hair. He became protective of his phone, changing his password and always keeping it face down. I'd been married to the man for 6 years. I knew his patterns, his habits, his tells. But I was so beaten down by that point, so exhausted and demoralized, that I almost didn't care. Part of me even thought, well, if he's getting it somewhere else, maybe he'll leave me alone. But I couldn't quite ignore it. Call it pride, call it stubbornness, call it the last dying ember of my self-respect. I needed to know for sure. One night, Christopher was in the shower. His phone was on the nightstand, and for once he'd forgotten to take it with him. I picked it up, my heart pounding, and I saw he'd left it unlocked. A rare mistake. The messages I found made me physically ill. Hundreds of them, going back almost 2 years. intimate photos, love confessions, plans for secret meetings, and most devastating of all, discussions about their baby. Their baby. Her name was Vanessa Clark, and she was everything I wasn't. Young, just 25 to my 33. Beautiful in that Instagram filter kind of way, long blonde hair, perfect makeup, designer clothes. She worked as a receptionist at Christopher's firm, which explained all those late nights. But it was the messages between Christopher and his mother that truly broke me. "Mom, Vanessa had an ultrasound. It's a boy, 95% certain. Your grandson. Finally, Christopher, my darling boy, this is wonderful news. You've done well. That Vanessa girl seems much more suitable than Isabella anyway. So elegant, so refined. And a boy, after that disappointment with Isabella only giving us a girl. For now, keep this quiet. We need to figure out how to handle the situation. If you need money to take care of Vanessa, just tell me. I can use Isabella's salary. She'll never know." I read those messages 3 times, 4 times, unable to process what I was seeing. My husband had been cheating on me for 2 years. His mother not only knew, but was actively encouraging it. They were using my money to support his mistress and their baby. And it was all because I'd had the audacity to give birth to a girl instead of a boy. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was hot and cold at the same time, making my vision blur and my hands shake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break things. I wanted to run into the bathroom and confront Christopher right there. But I didn't. Because beneath the rage was a calculated survival instinct I didn't even know I had. If I confronted them now, what would happen? Christopher would deny it or manipulate me. Margot would gaslight me, tell me I was crazy and ungrateful. They'd close ranks, protect each other, and probably throw me out without a penny to my name. The house was in Margot's name. The savings account was in her name. I had nothing legally speaking. I'd be homeless with a 4-year-old daughter and no resources. No, if I was going to do this, I needed to do it smart. I needed evidence, I needed a plan, and I needed to make damn sure I came out of this with something. So I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. When Christopher came out of the shower, whistling cheerfully, I smiled at him and asked if he wanted tea. He kissed my forehead absent-mindedly and said sure, then settled in to watch TV while I brought him his favorite blend. Inside, I was already planning my escape. Time to gather evidence, time to consult a lawyer secretly, time to figure out what I was legally entitled to. For the next 2 months, I played the role of the perfect wife better than ever. I smiled more. I didn't complain. I kept the house spotless and made Christopher's favorite meals, all while secretly screenshotting messages, photographing bank statements, recording conversations, and transferring small amounts of money into a secret account I'd opened. I was careful, so careful. I couldn't let them suspect anything. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One Friday evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Christopher and Vanessa entering a hotel downtown. The message was brief but cutting. Thought you should know what your husband does while you're at home playing housewife. Room 1407. A friend. I stared at that message for a long time. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and waiting for. I could ignore it, continue gathering evidence quietly. Or I could confront them and end this charade once and for all. I dropped Lily at my parents' house, making up an excuse about a work emergency. Then I drove to that hotel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. Room 1407 was on the 14th floor. I stood outside that door for what felt like an eternity, my hand raised to knock, my whole body trembling. This was it. After this, there was no going back. I knocked. "Room service," I called out, disguising my voice slightly. Footsteps, the lock clicking. And then the door opened to reveal Christopher, wearing only a hotel bathrobe, his hair messy, his face flushed. The shock on his face when he saw me was almost comical. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, no words coming out. I pushed past him into the room. Vanessa was there, lounging on the bed in expensive lingerie I certainly hadn't bought, her hand resting on her slightly rounded stomach. She looked at me with this smug, triumphant expression that made my blood boil. "Oh," she said, not even bothering to cover herself. "You must be Isabella. Christopher's told me so much about you." I ignored her and turned to my husband. "Get dressed. We need to talk." "Isabella, I can explain. he started, finally finding his voice. Explain what? Explain how you've been cheating on me for 2 years. Explain how you've been using my salary to wine and dine your mistress. Explain how you and your mother have been planning to replace me. I pulled out my phone, showing him screenshots of his messages. Don't bother lying. I have everything. His face went pale. You went through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy. I laughed bitterly. Your privacy? That's what you're concerned about right now? Not the fact that you've been betraying your wife and daughter? Vanessa sat up straighter, her hand protective over her stomach. He loves me. He was going to leave you anyway. I'm giving him what you never could, a son, a real heir. That's when I lost it. 6 years of suppressed rage came pouring out. A son? I spat. Is that what this is about? You think having a boy makes you special? You're nothing but a homewrecker who got pregnant to trap a man who's already married. And you, I turned back to Christopher, you're a coward who couldn't even be honest enough to ask for a divorce. You just snuck around behind my back, stealing from me to support your affair. Don't talk to her like that. Christopher suddenly found his courage, moving to stand between Vanessa and me. Vanessa is carrying my child. She deserves respect. And I don't? Your wife of 6 years, the mother of your daughter, the woman who's been supporting your lifestyle, I don't deserve respect? You've always been so cold, he said, his voice rising. So focused on work, so distant. What did you expect? Vanessa makes me happy. She appreciates me. I was cold. My voice was dangerously quiet now. I worked a full-time job, ran your mother's household like a servant, raised our daughter alone, all while being systematically starved and isolated. And I was cold? He raised his hand, whether to gesture or something worse I'll never know, but I flinched instinctively. That movement, that automatic cringe from a woman who'd never been hit, but was suddenly afraid she might be, seemed to wake something in him. Or maybe it just made him angrier. His hand connected with my face. The slap echoed in the hotel room. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my cheek, shock numbing me more than pain. He'd hit me. My husband had actually hit me. Get out, he said coldly. Get out of here. This is between Vanessa and me. You have no right to barge in here and ruin everything. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. And I realized I didn't know this man at all. Maybe I never had. You're right, I said quietly, my hand still on my burning cheek. I'll go. But Christopher, this marriage is over. Enjoy your new family. I hope she's worth it. If you feel my words, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're from. I want to see how far a woman's voice can really travel. Help me build this community so we can share more stories that matter. I walked out of that hotel room with my head high, even though inside I was crumbling. I drove straight home, not to Margot's house, but to my parents' place in Brookfield. I needed to see Lily, hold her, remember what was truly important. My mother took one look at my face, the red handprint still visible, and burst into tears. My father, usually the calm one, started pacing furiously. That's it, he said. Isabella, you're not going back there. You and Lily are staying here. We'll figure everything else out. Dad, I can't just— Yes, you can, and you will. He grabbed my shoulders gently, forcing me to look at him. Sweetheart, we've watched you disappear over the past 6 years. The bright, confident daughter we raised became this ghost who barely speaks, barely smiles. We've been waiting for you to see it yourself. Now you have. Don't go back. He was right. In my parents' cozy living room, holding my sleeping daughter, I finally let myself acknowledge the truth. I'd been in an abusive marriage. Maybe Christopher had never hit me before tonight, but the financial control, the isolation, the constant criticism, that was abuse too. And I'd normalized it for so long that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be treated with basic human dignity. The next morning, I filed for divorce. I hired a lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Green, who specialized in cases like mine. When I showed her the evidence I'd collected, her eyes lit up. Isabella, this is gold. Financial abuse, infidelity, misappropriation of funds, we have them dead to rights. But I need to warn you, they're going to fight dirty. She was right. She was so right. The divorce proceedings were ugly in ways I couldn't have imagined. Christopher and Margot didn't just fight the divorce, they went on the offensive, trying to paint me as an unfit mother, a money-hungry schemer, an adulterous wife. They brought fake witnesses, who swore they'd seen me with other men. They presented doctored financial records, claiming I'd been the one wasting money. They demanded custody of Lily, claiming I was mentally unstable and couldn't provide for her. But I had something they didn't. The truth, documented and undeniable. Patricia destroyed their fake witnesses on the stand, exposing them as paid actors. She presented the bank statements showing exactly where my salary had gone. She played recordings of Margot admitting to taking my money to support Vanessa. The judge was not impressed. But the piece of evidence that sealed the deal was something I'd almost forgotten about. The land. When Christopher and I got married, my parents had given us, well, me specifically, a piece of land they'd been saving for their retirement. It was about 5 acres on the outskirts of Brookfield, with beautiful views and development potential. The deed was in my name alone, signed before the marriage, explicitly stating it was a gift to their daughter. 2 months before I discovered the affair, Christopher and Margot had tried to pressure me into selling that land. They claimed Christopher needed investment capital for a business opportunity. They pushed and pushed, getting angrier when I refused. Now I knew why they'd been so desperate. Christopher had gambling debts, massive gambling debts. He'd been sports betting online, losing tens of thousands of dollars, and loan sharks were threatening him. On top of that, Vanessa had been demanding he buy her a condo to live in during her pregnancy, somewhere suitable for raising the sterling heir. They'd planned to sell my land, pocket the money, and use it to clear Christopher's debts and buy Vanessa's condo. When I refused, they'd gotten desperate. Patricia presented all of this in court. The gambling records, the threats from loan sharks, the text messages between Christopher and Vanessa about the condo. The judge's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. The final ruling was everything I'd hoped for and more. I got full custody of Lily, with Christopher granted supervised visitation only. He was ordered to pay child support, though Patricia warned me we'd probably have to fight to see any of it. The land was confirmed as my separate property, untouchable by Christopher. And the marital assets, what few remained after Christopher's gambling and spending on Vanessa, were split, with me receiving the larger share as compensation for the financial abuse. The judge ordered Margot to return the money she'd taken from my salary over the years, or at least account for where it had gone. Of course, she claimed she'd spent it all on household expenses, and had no records, so that money was lost forever. Still, I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in years. I was free, truly free. Margot Sterling had no more power over me. Christopher Sterling was legally no longer my husband. I had my daughter, my self-respect, and a fresh start ahead of me. The next 3 months were challenging but transformative. I rented a small apartment in Seattle, near my job. It was tiny compared to Margot's Victorian mansion, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every decoration, I chose it, I controlled it, and that felt incredible. Without the burden of Margot's household, without the emotional drain of a failing marriage, I flourished. I was promoted within 2 months to senior marketing director, with a salary increase that made my former $6,500 look like pocket change. I was pulling in $9,000 a month now, and every penny of it was mine to spend or save as I chose. I started taking care of myself again. Got a stylish new haircut that framed my face. Bought clothes that actually fit and flattered me, instead of the frumpy, oversized things Margot had insisted made me look respectable. I joined a gym, took up yoga, started eating meals that weren't cobbled together from $20 grocery budgets. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was someone I'd barely recognized, and yet she was also familiar. She was the Isabella I'd been before Christopher, before Margot, before 6 years of systematic degradation. Strong, beautiful even. Men noticed. Of course they noticed. Colleagues, clients, even strangers at coffee shops would smile at me, strike up conversations, ask for my number. It was flattering, but I wasn't interested, not yet. I was enjoying my freedom too much to even think about dating. And Lily was thriving too. Away from Margot's constant criticism and Christopher's indifference, she blossomed into the happy, confident little girl she was always meant to be. She asked about her father sometimes, but never with any real sadness. How can you miss someone who was never really there? During those 3 months of peace, I heard occasional rumors about Christopher and his new family. Through mutual acquaintances, through social media, through the gossip mill that is any major city. Christopher had moved Vanessa into Margot's house immediately after the divorce. Margot, apparently thrilled to finally have her grandson on the way, had welcomed Vanessa with open arms. For a while, they seemed happy. Christopher posted photos on social media of Vanessa's growing belly, making grand proclamations about fatherhood and fresh starts. But cracks started showing quickly. Christopher's gambling debts hadn't gone away. Without access to my salary, without the ability to sell my land, he was scrambling to pay them off. He took out personal loans, he borrowed from friends. He even tried to start a business, some sort of restaurant venture, but he had no experience and even less sense, and it hemorrhaged money. Vanessa, meanwhile, turned out to be expensive. Very expensive. The condo Christopher had promised her still hadn't materialized. Instead, she was living in Margot's house and apparently making the older woman's life hell. I heard this from Christina, a former neighbor of Margot's who'd always been kind to me. She called me one day out of the blue. "Isabella, it's Christina. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from your mother. I thought you'd want to know. Things had gotten really bad at the Sterling house." "What do you mean?" I asked, more curious than concerned. "That Vanessa woman, she's a nightmare. She's got Margot running around like a servant, demanding expensive food, expensive clothes, throwing tantrums, and she's so lazy, doesn't lift a finger around the house. Margot, who used to boss you around so much, now she's the one being bossed. The tables have completely turned." I felt a flicker of satisfaction at that. Karma was a beautiful thing. "And Christopher?" I asked. "Stressed out of his mind. The restaurant is failing. He's still gambling, trying to win back what he lost, but just digging himself deeper. I heard the loan sharks came to the house once. Margot had to pay them off to get them to leave. She had to take out a mortgage on the house to do it. That shocked me. Margot had always been so proud of that house, so protective of it. It was her symbol of status, her proof that she was better than everyone else. The fact that she'd mortgaged it meant things were truly desperate. I just thought you'd want to know. After everything they put you through, seeing them struggle feels like justice, doesn't it?" It did. It really did. But more than that, their struggles made me grateful. Grateful I'd gotten out when I did. Grateful I hadn't wasted any more years of my life on people who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. I thanked Christina for the call and hung up, feeling oddly peaceful. I didn't wish them well exactly, but I also didn't spend my time obsessing over their downfall. I was too busy building my own life up. And then, 3 months to the day after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang. Margot Sterling. And the nightmare started all over again, pulling me back into a past I'd worked so hard to escape. After I hung up on Margot at the hospital, I sat in my balcony garden for a long time, staring at nothing. The rage that had surged through me during the call was slowly ebbing, leaving behind something more complex. Satisfaction, yes. Vindication, absolutely. But also a strange sort of emptiness. I'd imagined this moment countless times during those 6 terrible years. The moment when Margot Sterling would need me, would beg me, would finally see my worth. In my fantasies, I'd been cold and cutting, throwing her own words back at her, making her feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. And I'd done that. I'd said everything I wanted to say. So why didn't I feel better? Maybe because revenge, it turns out, is more satisfying in theory than in practice. Or maybe because even after everything, some small part of me, the part that had loved Christopher once, the part that had tried so hard to be a good daughter-in-law, couldn't quite let go of basic human empathy. I picked up my phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I made a call. Not to Margot, not to Christopher, but to Thomas Morrison, my former colleague who now worked at a nonprofit that helped low-income families with medical expenses. "Thomas, it's Isabella Chen. I'm sorry to call so late. I need to ask you about your organization's emergency fund program." We talked for 20 minutes. I explained the situation, carefully, without revealing who the patient was. I told him there was someone at Riverside Memorial who needed surgery, someone whose family had been scammed out of their savings, someone who would die without help. I can't pay for it myself, I said, but I can vouch for the need. I can guarantee that this is a legitimate case, not fraud. Would your organization consider it? Thomas was quiet for a moment. Isabella, are you sure about this? Given what you've told me about your divorce, if this is who I think it is. I know, but I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it for me, so I can look myself in the mirror and know I didn't let someone die, even someone who wronged me terribly. Does that make sense? It does. You're a better person than most, Isabella. I'll see what we can do. I sent him Christopher's information and the hospital details. Then I set my phone down and took a deep breath. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. I didn't call Margot back to tell her about the charity. Let her figure it out herself. Maybe the organization would help, maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I'd done what I could within my boundaries. I'd shown compassion without sacrificing myself, and that felt like the right balance. The next few days passed peacefully. I focused on work, on Lily, on my new life. I didn't hear from Margot again, and I didn't ask anyone about Christopher's condition. That chapter of my life was closed, and I intended to keep it that way. But then, about a week later, I ran into Christopher's friend Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. We'd been friendly once, before the divorce. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he wanted to pretend he hadn't. But I walked straight up to him. Marcus, how are you? He shifted awkwardly. Isabella, I'm okay. How about you? You look great, actually. Really great. Thank you, I'm doing well. I hesitated, then asked the question I'd been avoiding. How is Christopher? Marcus's expression darkened. You heard about the accident? I heard. He's alive. The surgery went through. Some charities stepped in with the money at the last minute. Margot said it was a miracle. He smiled grimly. Of course, knowing her, she probably took credit for it. But Isabella, the surgery saved his life, but not much else. He's got severe brain damage. The doctors say he'll likely never wake up. He's in what they call a persistent vegetative state. I absorbed this information silently. I didn't feel happy about it. I didn't feel sad either. I just felt numb. And Vanessa? Marcus's smile turned bitter. Gone. Took all the money from Christopher's secret savings. About $70,000 he'd been hiding. And disappeared. Turns out the baby she was carrying? Not Christopher's. There's a whole mess there involving some married real estate developer. She was running a scam the whole time. Despite everything, I felt a flash of satisfaction at that. So Margot's precious grandson never existed. Not in the way she thought anyway. When the truth came out, it broke something in her. Had to sell the house to pay off Christopher's remaining debts and medical bills. Last I heard, she was moving into a tiny apartment in one of the rough neighborhoods, taking Christopher with her. She's going to have to care for him for the rest of his life, or hers, whichever comes first. We stood there in silence for a moment, both contemplating the absolute implosion of the Sterling family. I'm sorry, Marcus finally said. I know he treated you terribly. They both did. I should have said something back then. We all should have. Yes, I agreed quietly. You should have. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just glad I got out when I did. Marcus nodded. For what it's worth, you seem genuinely happy now. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I will. We parted ways, and I walked back to my office, thinking about the strange turns life takes. A year ago, I'd been trapped in that house, believing I had no options, no future, no way out. Now Christopher was the one trapped, in his own body, in a life without hope or possibility of escape. I didn't feel vindicated by his fate. I just felt grateful. Grateful that I'd found the courage to leave. Grateful that I'd rebuilt my life. Grateful that my daughter would grow up seeing her mother as a strong, independent woman, rather than a silent victim. That evening I took Lily to the park. The autumn leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air had that crisp, clean quality that always made me feel alive. Lily ran ahead, laughing, chasing after a butterfly, and I watched her with a full heart. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Isabella, this is Margot. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was wrong. I was terrible to you. I see that now. I've lost everything. My home, my son, my future. You were right about all of it. I hope you can forgive me someday. I read the message twice. Then I deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. And that was okay. I didn't need Margot's apology to move forward. I'd already done that on my own. 2 years passed. 2 wonderful, peaceful, empowering years. I got another promotion, vice president of marketing now, with a salary that would have seemed impossible to my younger self. I bought a beautiful condo with a view of the Seattle skyline. My parents came to visit often, and Lily was thriving in her new school, making friends and discovering that the world was so much bigger than one unhappy household. I started dating eventually, casually at first. I met some nice men, some not so nice ones, and learned to trust my instincts again. I didn't feel any rush to remarry. If it happened, it happened. If not, I was perfectly content building a life with my daughter and my career. One cold December afternoon, I was driving through downtown Seattle, doing some Christmas shopping, when I saw something that made me pull over. There, on a busy corner, sitting on the sidewalk with a cup for donations, was a woman who looked vaguely familiar. She was wrapped in layers of worn clothing, her hair thin and gray, her face lined with exhaustion. Next to her was a man in a wheelchair, emaciated, vacant-eyed, drooling slightly. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring. It was Margot Sterling and Christopher. I almost didn't recognize them. The proud, imperious Margot, who'd once inspected her house with white gloves, was now begging on the streets. The handsome, confident Christopher, who'd once had everything, was now an empty shell, entirely dependent on his elderly mother for survival. I could have driven past. Probably should have. But something made me get out of the car. I walked over slowly, and Margot looked up at me. For a moment, there was no recognition in her eyes. I was just another person passing by. Then her eyes focused, and I saw the shock, the shame, and something that might have been hope. "Isabella," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, thin, nothing like the commanding tone that had ordered me around for 6 years. "Sterling," I said neutrally. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." She gestured vaguely at herself, at Christopher, at their situation. "As you can see, things have changed." "I can see that." We stood there awkwardly. Lily was back in the car, thankfully, watching through the window. I didn't want her to see this, to understand who these people were. "I meant what I said in that text," Margot continued. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was cruel to you. Terrible. I justified it by telling myself I was doing what was best for my family, but really I was just being selfish and controlling and awful. You deserve so much better." "Yes," I said simply, "I did." "Are you happy now?" I thought about my question, my beautiful condo, my successful career, my healthy, thriving daughter, my freedom to make my own choices, my life completely and truly mine. "Yes," I said, "I'm very happy." Margot's eyes filled with tears. "I'm glad. At least some good came from all of this. At least you got free." I looked at Christopher, slumped in his wheelchair, and felt a complicated mix of emotions. Pity, yes, but also a profound gratitude that I wasn't the one sitting there, that I wasn't the one who destroyed my own life through greed and cruelty. "Mrs. Sterling," I said quietly, pulling out my wallet, "I'm going to give you something. Not because I forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. And not because I think you deserve help. Honestly, I think what's happened to you is the natural consequence of how you treated people. But because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I'm tired of carrying any piece of you with me." I handed her $500 in cash. Her hands shook as she took it. "This isn't charity," I continued. "Think of it as payment for a valuable lesson. You taught me exactly what kind of person I never want to be. You taught me that money and status mean nothing if you don't have basic human decency. You taught me that treating people as disposable will eventually leave you alone. Those were expensive lessons, but they were worth learning." "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. Goodbye, Mrs. Sterling. I genuinely hope things get better for you. But I won't be checking to see if they do." I walked back to my car, feeling lighter than I had in years. Lily looked at me curiously. "Who was that, Mommy?" "Just someone I used to know," I said, starting the engine. Ready to go get hot chocolate? Yes. She bounced excitedly in her seat, already forgetting about the sad woman on the sidewalk. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Margot was still sitting there, clutching the money, watching my card disappear into traffic. I wondered what she was thinking. If she was reflecting on the choices that had led her to that corner. If she understood how completely she'd destroyed her own life. But mostly, I didn't wonder. Because it wasn't my problem anymore. Margot Sterling and Christopher Sterling were footnotes in my story now. They'd taught me what I needed to learn, and then I'd moved on. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. The same routine I'd had 3 months after my divorce, when Margot's phone call had interrupted my peace. But this time, I knew that peace was permanent. Nothing from my past could shake it anymore. I thought about the journey I'd been on, from a naive young woman who thought marriage meant sacrifice, to a beaten-down servant who'd lost herself completely, to a survivor who'd reclaimed her life on her own terms. It had been brutal, painful. There were nights I'd cried so hard I thought I might break. Days I doubted whether I had the strength to keep going. But I had kept going, and not only had I survived, I'd thrived. I'd become the person I was always meant to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my divorce lawyer who'd become a friend. Heard from a mutual acquaintance that you ran into the Sterlings today. You okay? I'm great, I typed back. Finally put that chapter fully behind me. Feel amazing. Good for you. Drinks next week to celebrate? Absolutely. I set my phone down and looked out at the Seattle skyline, glittering with lights. Somewhere out there, Christopher lay in a bed, trapped in a body that no longer worked, his mind gone, his future erased. Somewhere out there, Margot Sterling was probably huddled in a cold apartment, trying to figure out how to care for her invalid son, with $500 and no prospects. I should have felt satisfied by their suffering, but I didn't. I just felt free. Free from anger, free from resentment, free from the need for revenge. Their karma had caught up with them without any effort on my part. The universe had a way of balancing the scales, and my scale, it was tipped firmly toward happiness, toward success, toward a future full of possibility. The next morning I woke up early and made breakfast for Lily, fluffy pancakes with fresh berries and maple syrup. We ate together at our small dining table, talking about her day ahead, her friends at school, the Christmas play she was nervous about auditioning for. You're talented and brave and wonderful. Like you, Mommy? I smiled. I hope so, sweetheart. I hope you grow up to be even braver than me. After dropping her at school, I headed to work. My team was in the middle of a major campaign launch, and I was energized by the challenge. At lunch, my phone rang. It was my mother. Isabella, I just heard from Christina. She said you saw Margot and Christopher yesterday. I did. And how do you feel? Honestly, Mom, I feel nothing. Maybe a little sad that anyone has to live like that. But no anger, no satisfaction, nothing. They're just strangers now. My mother was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, you know. You could have become bitter and hard after what they put you through. Instead, you became stronger and kinder. That takes real courage. I learned from the best, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You and Dad taught me that my worth isn't determined by how others treat me. That saved me, Mom. That knowledge saved my life. We talked for a while longer, and after hanging up, I sat at my desk feeling grateful. Grateful for my parents, who'd raised me with love and given me a soft place to land when my world fell apart. Grateful for Patricia, who'd fought for me when I was too tired to fight for myself. Grateful for my daughter, who gave me a reason to keep going even on the darkest days. The weeks leading up to Christmas were busy and joyful. I decorated my condo with Lily, and we baked cookies and watched holiday movies. I bought her everything she asked for, and some things she didn't, making up for those years when Margot had insisted we couldn't afford toys or treats. On Christmas Eve, my parents came over. We had a big dinner, nothing fancy, just lasagna and salad and garlic bread, but it was made with love and eaten with laughter. Lily opened one present, a tradition from my childhood, and squealed with delight at the art set inside. Looking around my dining table, at my parents, my daughter, my home that I'd built from nothing, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what family was supposed to be. Not control or obligation or conditional love. just people who cared about each other, supporting each other, being together. "Mom," Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Why are you crying?" "Happy tears, sweetie. These are happy tears." After my parents left and Lily was asleep, I stood at my window looking out at the city. Snow was falling softly, blanketing Seattle in white. Everything looked clean and new and full of promise. I thought about the phone call that had started this whole reflection 3 months ago. Margot's desperate voice demanding I save Christopher. The rage I'd felt, the satisfaction of saying no, the complicated journey toward letting go. I'd made the right choice that night. I'd set boundaries and stuck to them. I'd showed compassion on my own terms, through the charity without sacrificing myself. And then I'd moved forward. Some people might say I should have paid the $40,000 myself. That I should have been the bigger person, should have saved Christopher's life regardless of what he'd done to me. But those people had never been systematically degraded for 6 years. They'd never had every penny of their salary stolen. They'd never been hit by someone who promised to love them. I didn't owe Christopher or Margot anything. Not my money, not my time, not my forgiveness, not my emotional labor. I'd given them 6 years of my life, and that was 6 years too many. The months continued to pass and my life continued to flourish. I got comfortable in my role as vice president. I started mentoring younger women in the company, helping them navigate the corporate world and avoid the pitfalls I'd fallen into. Several of them confided in me about their own struggles with controlling partners or overbearing in-laws, and I was able to give them advice and resources. "You're not stuck," I'd tell them. "It feels like you are, but you're not. There's always a way out. It might be hard, it might be scary, but it's possible." One young woman, Jennifer, was in a situation eerily similar to my own. Her boyfriend's mother controlled all their finances, and Jennifer was expected to work full-time while also serving as an unpaid housekeeper and cook. She'd been in this situation for 3 years and saw no way out. I took her to coffee and spent 2 hours walking her through the steps I'd taken. Document everything, open a secret bank account, save what you can, talk to a lawyer, make a plan, and then when you're ready, leave and don't look back. 6 months later, Jennifer came to my office with tears in her eyes. "I did it. I left. I got my own apartment. I ended the relationship. And Isabella, I've never felt better. Thank you. Thank you for showing me it was possible." I just held up a mirror so you could see your own strength. Stories like Jennifer's made everything I'd been through feel worthwhile. If my experience could help even one other woman escape a bad situation, then it hadn't been for nothing. A year after I'd seen Margot and Christopher on that street corner, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. The topic was overcoming adversity and rebuilding after divorce. I almost said no. I'm not usually comfortable being that public about my private life. But something pushed me to say yes. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of women, I felt nervous. But then I started talking, and the words just flowed. I told them my story, not in this much detail, but the broad strokes, the controlling marriage, the financial abuse, the betrayal, the moment I decided enough was enough, the terrifying process of leaving, the hard work of rebuilding, and finally, the joy of discovering who I really was, free from someone else's expectations and control. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you it was easy," I said, because it wasn't. There were days I wanted to give up, days I thought maybe they were right, maybe I was worthless, maybe I'd never make it on my own. But I kept going, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one small victory at a time, and eventually, those small victories added up to a completely new life. The applause when I finished was thunderous. But more importantly, afterward, dozens of women came up to me. Some wanted to share their own stories, some wanted advice, some just wanted to say thank you for speaking their truth. One older woman, probably in her 70s, grabbed my hand, with tears streaming down her face. "I wish I'd had your courage when I was young," she said. "I stayed in a bad marriage for 45 years because I didn't think I had any other option. Hearing you speak, seeing what you've built for yourself, it gives me hope that it's not too late for my granddaughter. She's in a situation like yours. I'm going to send her the recording of your talk." "It's never too late," I told her. "For your granddaughter or even for you. We're never too old to reclaim our lives." That night, driving home, I felt a profound sense of purpose. This was why I'd gone through everything I had, not just to save myself, but to be able to help others. To stand as proof that escape is possible, that rebuilding is possible, that happiness on the other side is possible. If you feel my words, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're from. I want to see how far a woman's voice can really travel. Help me build this community so we can share more stories that matter, so we can support each other through the hardest times. Time continued its relentless march forward. Lily grew taller, smarter, more confident. She made the honor roll every semester. She joined the drama club and discovered a love for acting. She made friends easily and never seemed to inherit the people-pleasing tendencies that had gotten me into trouble. Sometimes, watching her interact with her friends or stand up to a teacher she disagreed with, respectfully but firmly, I'd marvel at her. This was what a child raised with healthy boundaries and unconditional love looked like. She knew her worth. She knew that love didn't require shrinking herself or accepting mistreatment. On her 8th birthday, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Mommy, do you ever think about my father?" We were frosting her birthday cake together, and I paused with the spatula in midair. We'd talked about Christopher before, in age-appropriate ways. She knew he existed, knew he'd made mistakes, knew he wasn't able to be part of our lives. But she'd never asked this particular question. "Sometimes," I answered honestly, "but not in a way you might think. I don't miss him or wish things were different. Mostly I think about how his choices taught me important lessons." "What lessons?" she asked. I thought carefully about how to phrase this. That love should make you feel bigger, not smaller. That family should support you, not control you. That it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if other people think you should stay. And that the bravest thing you can ever do is stand up for yourself. Lily nodded seriously, absorbing this. "I'm glad you walked away from him." "Me too, sweetheart, me too. Because if you hadn't, I wouldn't have this life. We wouldn't have this apartment. And I wouldn't go to my school. And we wouldn't have our movie nights, or our Sunday pancakes, or any of the good stuff." Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. She was absolutely right. Every good thing in our current life existed because I'd found the courage to leave a bad situation. If I'd stayed, trying to make it work, trying to be good enough for people who'd never appreciate me, both Lily and I would have been miserable. "You're very wise," I told her, pulling her into a hug. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you, Mommy." That night, after the party, just a few close friends from her school, cake, games, and laughter. After Lily was asleep, surrounded by her new presents, I sat on my balcony with my now traditional cup of tea. I'd been doing this almost every night for years now, sitting in the quiet, reflecting on the day, feeling grateful for my life. My phone buzzed. An email from my company. The CEO wanted to see me first thing Monday morning. A flutter of nervousness hit me, but I pushed it down. Whatever it was, I could handle it. I'd survived far worse than anything a corporate meeting could throw at me. Monday morning came. I dressed carefully in my best suit, a deep navy that made me look professional and confident. Whatever this meeting was about, I was ready. The CEO's office was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Richard Chen, no relation, was in his 60s, a self-made man who built the company from nothing. I'd always respected him. "Isabella, thank you for coming. Please sit down." I sat, my heart pounding, despite my outward calm. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "As you know, I'm planning to retire in the next 2 years. The board and I have been discussing succession planning, and your name keeps coming up. How would you feel about being groomed for a C-suite position? Chief Marketing Officer, specifically." For a moment, I couldn't speak. CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, one of the top positions in the entire company. Me. I'd be honored, I managed. Thrilled. Yes, absolutely yes. Richard smiled. "Good. You've earned it, Isabella. You're talented, hardworking, and you have a quality that can't be taught. You genuinely care about people. That makes you a leader worth following. We'll start transitioning you into the role over the next 18 months. There will be additional training, more responsibility, longer hours sometimes. Can you handle that?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I can handle anything." And I meant it, because I'd already handled the hardest thing imaginable, leaving behind everything I knew to bet on myself. Corporate challenges were nothing compared to that. The next year and a half flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, training sessions, strategy planning, and long days. But I loved every minute of it. I was good at this work. More than good, I was excellent. And I was finally in a position where people recognized and rewarded that excellence. My personal life was full too. I dated a bit more seriously, meeting a man named David who was kind, successful, and emotionally available. We took things slow, both of us having been burned in previous relationships. But it felt right. Comfortable. Like coming home. Lily adored him, which was important to me. I'd never introduce her to anyone I wasn't serious about, and David understood that. He never tried to replace Christopher, not that there was much to replace, but he was a stable, positive male presence in her life. On the 3-year anniversary of my divorce, David took me to dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the water. We'd been together for about 6 months by then, and things were getting serious. "Isabella," he said over dessert, "I want you to know that I see you. I see how hard you've worked to build this life. I see how much you've overcome. I see what an incredible mother you are, and I see what an amazing, strong, brilliant woman you are. I'm not trying to rush anything, but I need you to know, I'm falling in love with you, and I'm in this for the long haul, if you'll have me." Tears pricked my eyes. "I'm falling in love with you too," I admitted. "And David, I'm not scared anymore. For years, I was terrified of letting anyone close. Of giving anyone power over my life again. But you've shown me that love doesn't have to be controlling or suffocating. It can just be good." He reached across the table and took my hand. "It can be great, actually, if we let it." "Then let's let it," I said, squeezing his hand back. Life wasn't perfect. It never is. There were still hard days, still moments of stress or worry or self-doubt. But they were normal human challenges, not the soul-crushing weight of living with people who actively work to diminish me. I thought about Christopher and Margot less and less. Months would go by without them crossing my mind. They'd become like characters in a book I'd read long ago. I remembered the story, but it didn't have any emotional power over me anymore. I did hear through Christina that Margot had eventually moved Christopher into a long-term care facility. The cost was subsidized by the state since she couldn't afford private care, and apparently the quality was pretty grim. Margot visited him every day, but he never showed any sign of recognition or awareness. He was a body kept alive by machines and basic care, nothing more. Part of me felt sorry for him. To be trapped like that, unable to move or speak or even think clearly, was a fate worse than death. But a larger part of me saw it as the ultimate karma. He'd tried to trap me in a life of servitude and misery. Instead, he'd trapped himself in a prison of his own body. As for Vanessa, I heard she'd been caught running the same scam on another man in another city. This time the man's family was less naive, and they'd pressed charges. She was facing fraud charges and possibly jail time. Her beauty and charm could only take her so far, and eventually her actions had caught up with her. When I shared this news with Patricia over drinks, she raised her glass in a mock toast. "To karma. May it always catch up with the people who deserve it." "To karma," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. "And to surviving long enough to see it work." We laughed, but there was truth in it. If I'd given up during those dark times, if I'd let Christopher and Margot's treatment convince me I was worthless, I would have missed out on all of this. The career success, the loving relationship, the joy of watching my daughter grow, the satisfaction of helping other women find their strength. On Lily's 10th birthday, we had a big party at our apartment. David was there, my parents, a dozen of Lily's school friends, some of my coworkers who'd become friends. The apartment was loud with laughter and music, and looking around at all these people who genuinely cared about us, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was my family now, not bound by obligation or DNA or tradition, but by choice and love and mutual respect. This was what I'd been searching for during all those years in Margot's house, a place where I belonged, where I was valued, where I could be myself. Later, after the party, after all the guests had gone home, after Lily was asleep with her new books and toys scattered around her room, I stood on my balcony one last time. The city lights sparkled below, and the night air was cool and sweet. I thought about the woman I'd been a decade ago, naive, optimistic, eager to please. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 years ago, broken, desperate, barely surviving. And I looked at the woman I was now, strong, successful, genuinely happy. The journey from there to here had been brutal, but I wouldn't change it, because every hardship, every betrayal, every moment of despair had led me to this moment, had shaped me into this person, and I liked who I was now. I was proud of who I'd become. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Still thinking about your smile tonight. You looked so happy. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. I smiled, typing back. I am happy, happier than I ever thought possible. See you tomorrow. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd learned that I didn't need everything to be perfect. I just needed to be true to myself, to set boundaries, to surround myself with people who lifted me up, rather than tore me down. The phone call from Margot 3 months after my divorce had been meant to pull me back into their chaos, to use me one more time. But instead, it had been the final nail in the coffin of my old life. It had shown me, definitively, that I'd made the right choice in leaving. That these people would never change, would never see me as anything more than a resource to exploit. And knowing that, being absolutely certain of it, had freed me in a way nothing else could. I raised my teacup to the night sky, a silent toast to myself, to surviving, to thriving. To becoming the woman I was always meant to be. Here's to you, Isabella, I whispered. You did it. You really did it. And I had. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, in the face of people who wanted to keep me small and controlled, I had reclaimed my life. I had built something beautiful from the ashes of my old existence. That's the thing about hitting rock bottom. The only direction left to go is up. And once you start climbing, once you remember what it feels like to have agency, and choice, and self-respect, there's no stopping. The world opens up in ways you never imagined. My story could have ended so differently. If I'd been a little less strong, a little less stubborn, a little less convinced that I deserved better, I might still be in that house, slowly dying inside, while pretending everything was fine. Or I might have ended up on the streets like Margot, broken and alone and full of regrets. But I didn't. I survived. And more than that, I flourished. Because I made the hardest decision of my life. To value myself enough to leave. And then I backed up that decision with action. Day after day, choice after choice, I built the life I wanted, rather than settling for the life others wanted to force on me. If there's one thing I want anyone hearing my story to understand, it's this. You are not trapped. It might feel like you are. The walls might seem insurmountable. The people controlling you might seem all-powerful. But you have more strength than you know. And there are people who will help you if you reach out. It won't be easy. I won't lie and say that leaving a bad situation is simple or painless. It's terrifying. It's hard. There will be days you doubt yourself. Days you want to go back just because the familiar is less scary than the unknown. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that pain is peace. On the other side of that struggle is a life that's truly yours. I wish I could go back and tell my 27-year-old self, the one who was about to marry Christopher, to run. I wish I could save her from 6 years of suffering. But I can't. All I can do is share my story and hope that it helps someone else recognize the warning signs earlier than I did. If your partner or their family wants to control all your money, that's a red flag. If you're expected to work full-time and also do all the household labor, that's a red flag. If you're constantly criticized and told you're not good enough, that's a red flag. If you're isolated from friends and family, if you're walking on eggshells trying not to upset anyone, that's a red flag. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't diminish. Love doesn't cage. Real love supports, encourages, respects. Real love is a partnership, not a dictatorship. Real love makes you feel bigger, not smaller. And if you're not experiencing that, you deserve better. You deserve so much better. As I stood on my balcony that night, looking out at the life I'd built, I made a promise to myself. I would never again settle for less than I deserved. I would never again make myself small to make someone else comfortable. I would never again sacrifice my own happiness for people who didn't appreciate it. And I would use my voice, my story, my success to help other women realize they have the same power, that it's never too late to start over. Because if I could do it, If I could go from being that broken, desperate woman on a rainy night with nothing but a suitcase and a 4-year-old daughter to this successful, confident woman with a beautiful life, then anyone can. It just takes courage. One moment of courage to say enough. And then more courage day after day to build something new. But that courage is inside all of us. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us it's there. So here I am, reminding you. If you're in a bad situation, you can leave. If you've been told you're worthless, you're not. If you've been convinced you can't survive on your own, you can. I'm living proof. And years from now, you'll be standing on your own metaphorical balcony, looking at the life you've built, and you'll think, I can't believe I almost stayed. I can't believe I almost accepted that as my reality. But you didn't, because you found your courage, and you used it to save yourself. That's the most powerful thing any of us can do. Save ourselves. Not wait for a rescue. Not hope someone else will fix things, but reach down inside, find that core of steel we all possess, and use it to change our own lives. I did it. You can too. I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself yet. Take that first step. Make that first call. Have that hard conversation. File those papers. Whatever your first step is, take it. And then take the next one. And the next one. Before you know it, you'll look back and realize you've walked 1,000 miles from where you started. And the person you were then won't even recognize the person you've become. In the best possible way. My story isn't unique. Thousands of women have experienced similar situations, similar betrayals, similar struggles. But we survive. We persevere. We rise. And then we turn around and reach back to help the next woman up. That's what I'm doing with my story. Reaching back, offering a hand, saying, I've been where you are, and I made it out, and you can too. So if you feel my words, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me which city you're from. I want to see how far a woman's voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories, so we can support each other, so we can prove that no matter how dark it gets, there's always a way forward. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And most importantly, thank you for believing that you deserve better. Because you do. We all do. Here's to surviving. Here's to thriving. Here's to building lives that are truly, completely, beautifully our own. This is Isabella Chen, signing off. But I'll be back with more stories, more truth, more proof that we are stronger than we know. Until then, take care of yourselves.